On Fridays, one of the great things that happens is the welcoming of these two guys to talk about a very busy week from the standpoint of the news. And politics has been more confusing and more confounding and frustrating than it has been in a long time. This guy is the former senior correspondent at ABC News, covered the White House for years. He's an award winner, and so glad he spends time with us on Fridays. How about it for Jim Avila, everyone?
Good morning.
Hello, sir.
How are you?
I'm very well. Better for seeing you. And this guy has forgotten more about politics than many of us will ever know. He is oftentimes seen on TYT and elsewhere. How about it for Michael Shure, everybody? Yeah. All right. Guys, I want to, there's so much going on, but I want to start with the selection of a leader, a speaker on the GOP side in the House of Representatives. Guy who kind of, on one level, has no name recognition really, but is known as a pretty hard right-winger. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that, Michael Shure?
Yeah, he's an ultra conservative. He's a Christian religious conservative. He's a Southern conservative. He is somebody whose record on issues, social issues, is far, far to the right of both the country and the Congress. So it is somebody that you can see why the Freedom Caucus members, that conservative caucus within the House Republican Conference, why they support Mike Johnson and are happy that he's the speaker on issues. But the speaker's job is not necessarily always about where they stand on issues. It's how they're able to, herd the cats there. And that is a very difficult thing to do with Republicans now.
Jim, that's an interesting point Michael makes or reminds us about, which is that it's not necessarily his agenda that he's going to be riding herd over, is it?
Well, it's going to be difficult no matter what. I wonder how long he's going to last. I mean, his strength is that he's not known and that he appears non-threatening. But as soon as you lift the veil just a bit, it's all there. It's very ugly. It's very scary. This is a guy who believes he was brought to the speakership by God. And is going to put religion at the top of his agenda. He had a prayer right on the floor of the House. They all got in a circle and started to pray. They're ignoring what Thomas Jefferson said. Their supposed founder, these people that they supposedly look up to. Hello, I
don't know what that was.
Say Thomas Jefferson again. See what happens.
Not here. Thomas Jefferson. There we go.
For those who are listening and not watching, as Jim's speaking, all of a sudden these balloons, like celebratory balloons, went up around him. I have no idea where that came from.
Some kind of effect. But at any rate, Thomas Jefferson said that church and state should be separated, and they ignore that. So he's dangerous to the Constitution. It is, while he seems to be, he's sort of this Clark Kent guy,
Right.
And I really don't know how long he'll last. I'm not sure how long the moderates will let him be there, because he's threatening their elections. He's threatening their survival in 2024.
You're saying his extremism actually can have a chilling effect on their ability to win.
Yeah, extremism is not popular. The extremists lost in 2022 from the Pennsylvania governor's race and on down. In Georgia, they lost. So even in places where there are Republican strongholds, extremism is not, MAGA is not all that popular. We even see this morning, I don't know if you saw it, but there was a Donald Trump video of him calling on God, talking about God. Donald Trump, the multi-divorce prostitute buying human, is calling on God now because he sees what's happening in the Republican Party. It is a shame.
But God put him there. I mean, it was evangelical Christians who came around to him after the primaries in a very, we've talked about it here before, in a very effective way. They elected a president. They got 3 Supreme Court justices. So he knows who he has to dance for when it comes to elections. He did it in 2016, 2020, and he's going to do it again should he be. And it looks like he will be the nominee in 2024.
But it's laughable to independents, Michael. It is so.
No, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying that's why he does what he does. Right. It's laughable to independents, but it doesn't affect all independents, right? I mean, some independents are not wooed by it, some laugh at it, and some are not moved by it, and they look at what the issues are. And generally, we know that independents look at the economy more than anything, right. and that's where Democrats can have a difficult time. I've spoke to one and communicated with 2 other members of Congress, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican since this happened. And, to what Jim's saying, perfectly, one of the Democrats who the one I actually spoke to said it was like the College of Cardinals came up with a pope. That's what it felt like to him. Yeah. When he saw what happened the other day. And that, popes wear out their welcome at a certain point or they die is what he said. And so it's, and that was tongue in cheek, but the point is that this is it was an exhausted conference that had somebody that people do like. People like Mike Johnson when you sit down and talk to him. He's in quotes, a good guy, but to many, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He is going to have a very, very difficult job. He may not last that long in this job, and the Republicans may not be able to maintain the majority. You already see a move this week to expel George Santos from Congress. Hard to see a Democrat winning that race losing that race on Long Island at this point. It was the Republican members of the New York delegation that called on that because they know they're all in Biden districts and they're endangered, all but one are. And so these sorts of things, more than anything, more than what Mike Johnson does right now, are going to impact the Congress, the balance of power. And Joe Biden is going to be sitting down. President Biden's going to be sitting down with a man who doesn't think he should be president, and that's going to be a difficult dance as well for Johnson and perhaps for the president. But it's always more difficult for the person who isn't the president.
And that's the challenge, isn't it? Go ahead.
Have you noticed, gentlemen, that he has not spoken to the press except for to Hannity? He has gone to a microphone, but he answers no questions. He walks away. He won't answer questions because he knows he has to answer for what he did in 2016.
And he also hasn't had time, Jim. I mean, speakers, when you work on Capitol Hill and you're in the halls and you'll see a speaker go by, very often they will rush by with their cadre of security. But most often, and to McCarthy's credit, he stopped more than many of them do. They sit and they talk to a handful of reporters, a gaggle of reporters, a lot of reporters, and Johnson hasn't done that. Johnson didn't seek this job for very long. He has never been in leadership as we know leadership. He probably isn't accustomed to the press conference in the same way. Not an excuse for him, but if this endures, it's going to be a problem for him. I would guess that it's just a matter of he's taking.
I don't think he wants to. I don't think he's figured out how to answer the question.
Right. I agree. That's what I'm saying. I think in time, he's going to face more microphones that are less friendly.
The prospect of this guy who you're talking about herding the cats that you also mentioned, Michael, and keeping the government open, handicap that for me, please.
Jim?
What do you think?
I think he's going to have trouble because the disruptors, the 8 disruptors, don't want the government to stay open. Donald Trump doesn't want the government to stay open. And they don't want to fund Ukraine, and they don't want to do some very important things that are going to, again, if he pushes it through with help of the Democrats, which is what he'll need. If he uses the Democrats to get over the hump, then he's going to have the same problem that Kevin McCarthy did, and those 8 people are going to vote against him. So I think he's going to have real trouble. He'll have to find some kind of common ground, which he talked about in his speech, which all sounded great. Let's see if it happens.
He also, look, his job as speaker, it changes, right? So while he, as a philosophical conservative, would probably be with those eight on a lot of the issues pertaining to the government shutdown, he's also the speaker. He also knows that he has to fundraise now. He's the most important fundraiser in the party, other than the presidential nominee, who raises money for himself, not for the party. He's got to fundraise on what he's able to do, and that's very different than having to win a congressional seat in northwest Louisiana. So he's got to be able to say, this is what we accomplished, this is why we did this, and this is how we're going to operate going forward. Democrats want to keep the government open. They're not going to shut things down or change direction just because they want to keep the government open. They want what they want, and they're going to get it, and they have the White House. But that may be, there's going to have to be compromise, and Mike Johnson, the speaker, is going to be different than Mike Johnson. He has to be, and if he's not, then it's going to be a disaster.
I'll get to the Middle East and the politics of the Middle East in a second, but I want to go to this story that just broke, the last overnight, kind of late yesterday, and that is this addition to the presidential sweepstakes, this Dean Phillips. It's a presidential campaign from a Democrat taking on Joe Biden. Can you guys speak to that? Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, Dean Phillips is a sort of backbench member of Congress, and I think he has been looked at, because he flirted with this a while, as somebody who could safely express concerns that Democrats have about some of the polls in the swing states, and that he would be somebody who could appeal to progressives. He's going to have to, though, be a little bit more conservative than a progressive. He's going to be going after Biden, I would guess, in a way that is almost Republican, going after him on the economy, going after him on immigration, going after him on age. And that's not a place that many Democrats want to be, or that's not a Democrat that many Democrats want to associate with, for tribal reasons more than anything, but also I think decorum. And there are a lot of Democrats who still think that Biden will win regardless, that these numbers are not impactful today, that the Democrats have not spent their war chest yet on Joe Biden. And so I don't think, Dean Phillips there are other polls he has to worry about, and those are the polls that show that nobody in the world knows who Dean Phillips is.
Yeah, so much of it is name recognition. Jim, what about the vulnerability of Biden?
Well, look, I think, there is some vulnerability, but I think that he's getting better and better. The economy figures came out this week, strongest economy in a while, huge increase in the GDP, huge unemployment numbers are great. There needs to be more, and I think we're seeing a little bit of that with the UAW. There needs to be more, better wages for workers, and I think that is a weakness, and that's maybe why, according to the New York Times, which was an article in it today, talking about why he's not doing well, and one of the reasons was because people aren't feeling it because their wages have not gone up. So that's the next step. But I think the economy is pretty damn good, and I think that for most people, even though they're not perhaps feeling it as much as they should, but gas prices are going down again. They may go up because of this war. That may be a problem. But, inflation is going down. So I think that he has plenty of things to campaign on. And I don't think this new guy in the race will ever win the presidency or beat Joe Biden. What he might do is amplify any weaknesses that Biden might have and encourage somebody else, a big name, to get in. But that's the only danger I see from him, is that if he somehow, Biden's not going to debate him. I guess he'll get on some primary some primary ballots, and if he shows any weakness there, then everybody will jump in. It's sort of like what happened to McCarthy back in 1968 when Robert Kennedy came in after he showed some weakness. That's the only thing that I think he might do.
Yeah, it's interesting, the history of these guys who come in, the Pat Buchanans of the world, the Edward Kennedys of the world.
But Edward Kennedy and Pat Buchanan, to even a greater extent than Dean Phillips, had impact within their flock. Democrats don't know who Dean Phillips is, so it's and not taking nothing away from him. He's a nice guy and a pretty junior member of Congress, but he's not the kind of person that galvanizes a movement, and nor is he the kind of person I think that facilitates. If there's a governor who wants to get into this presidential race, they're not going to get in it because Dean Phillips goes in there. I think he will disprove more than he proves, predictably, by getting in this race. I think that he will show that there is less resistance to Biden rather than more.
That's likely. I just want to push back a little bit, Michael, on that. If there's a protest vote, if there are enough Democrats who don't think that Biden is up to it, and there's an alternative on the ballot, and they go for this guy, that will show others that there's enough weakness for them to get in. That's the only thing.
That's when there's already been a ballot, right? I mean, those people have Bobby Kennedy Jr. to vote for too if they want. And I'm not saying they won't vote for Dean Phillips, but there's a viability question, and those are the things that can't be determined until you have an election. They don't, So if a couple of results come in that show Dean Phillips getting 14 and 18%, and some holes in the president's campaign, then yeah. But I think that I don't think it changes the equation very much. Maybe I'll be wrong, but
I think I agree with you. I think the only way that it would is if there's a protest vote.
Yeah.
In the chat, latest polls, the economy has Biden at 36%. Sorry, Jim, but you're not correct. On the economy,
Jim is correct. Excuse me, Andrew. Jim is right. These numbers, Andrew knows because he pays close attention to them. But when we talked about amplifying, right? Jim said Dean Phillips has to amplify his message. You can't without a microphone. These numbers don't have a microphone. We have two wars going on. We have a manhunt going on, and these great for a manhunt for a killer of 18. And these economic numbers are drowned in the news. So people don't know that. The economy is doing better. And that's why I keep mentioning the amount of money that's going to be spent to make sure that every American at least hears it is going to change the equation. It's not like Andrew's absolutely wrong, but I think Jim is more right than he is wrong on that. I think that those are the things that will help a president.
Sure. The employment numbers, the GDP numbers. I think Andrew's point is, eggs and gas and mortgage rates. These are things that are real and that live alongside these other things. But as you say, Michael, I think what you're making quite clear is once the message really gets out, that will help perhaps buoy Biden.
And once they realize a president has very little to do with the price of gas or certainly a mortgage rate, I would argue that he's right about the eggs. It's easier to tie a president.
Yeah, but I don't know where he's shopping. Eggs where I buy them are $3 a dozen.
Yeah.
I mean, $6 a dozen is not happening anymore.
Yeah, I don't know where $7 eggs are happening. That is true.
That's not happening anymore. There was a brief period where it had to do with the bird flu.
But let's not get that the cost of living is more important. I think that's what the eggs argument is. It's not just about eggs. It's about the cost of living for the average American is up now. And that is problematic with interest rates as high and gas particularly so high. So, but I in terms of the politics of it, there are ways to distance a president from the cost of gas and the cost and mortgage interest rates, especially when you have an economy coming back and you have a jobs market that is pristine. The problem becomes, what the eggs, the how much they are. It's about a lot lot of other things.
But sure, it's the line, the price of eggs. I mean, it's a generic line for a reason. What's that, Jim? Sorry.
It's disinformation. What he's doing is what the Republicans are doing. They're emphasizing $7 eggs when they don't exist anymore. The inflation issue has gone down, and that other stuff is disinformation. I'm sorry, he's wrong.
Well, but he first of all, he may be a Republican, and it doesn't matter. The point is there is a correct narrative about the cost of living over these past 5 years. It didn't start with Joe Biden. It's not directly tied to Joe Biden, but an opponent can tie it to Joe Biden in many ways. And all I'm saying is that once the Biden for president campaign starts, a lot of money is going to go into
Right.
messaging, and that messaging does change the equation a little bit.
Yeah.
If it's more expensive to live, it's more expensive to live, and things have that an issue that a president would have to address. Campaign.
Guys, I can't let you, I know our time is short, but please.
The Florida people have much more fun in their segment than we do, Mark.
I know, I'm sorry it has to be so serious. But look, to the very serious, which is what's happening in the Middle East and the ripple effects politically and what to do. It's not just the pure politics of it. I mean, it's the very difficult questions as to what to do. Jim, give me some thoughts on what can reasonably be done.
Well, I'm afraid of what they're doing right now. This morning, again, I was watching the pictures of the destruction of Gaza. Wholesale destruction of Gaza is not the answer. And I worry about it a lot. I can barely watch, and I have to watch because of my job. I can barely watch what's happening to the innocent civilians in Gaza. I don't have the answer, but I don't think the Israelis have the answer now either. It's not a good response. It's not the way it should be. And while we all support Israel's right to defend itself, when you have about now 3,000 civilians dead in Gaza, when is it enough? And I believe it's enough.
This is a tough spot for the Israelis with hostages coming off of this slaughter. They know that Hamas is there operating in Gaza, yet they don't know exactly where they are. They know some of the positions, but they are embedded. It is legit to say they are embedded in civilian communities. But so that leaves them in a tough position. Michael, it also leaves in the U.S., staunch ally of Israel, in a tough position. I guess that's what I'm getting at with the politics of it as well. And with a world that increasingly, and this is the sad part, I'm seeing, the rise of anti-Semitism worldwide and on college campuses here in the U.S. And I mean, it's a scary time. And so I think that the ripple effects of all of this have been far more substantial than one could have anticipated.
Yeah, it's clear that Israel needs to evaluate its leadership, and I think that that while America is almost a blind ally to Israel, I think you're seeing a little bit of that blindness go away with the Biden approach to this, saying, even hinting, and which is something U.S. presidents don't do, which could be something to be critical of U.S. presidents, but hinting at this not being the right way to respond. Yes, did they have a right to respond? That was hideous what happened to them. It was their Pearl Harbor, their 9/11, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be called anything than just a massacre of people. They do need to, whether or not people should think that it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. It is not. And you have to be able to separate the anti-Semitism from being able to criticize another government and the way that they're operating. And this clearly, in terms of a PR offensive, is not working. And I don't think as a military offensive, it's making any impact where it needs to make an impact. And that's the world stage and public opinion. And they need to underscore humanity if they're going to get any kind of sympathy from a world that just sees the destruction now.
Yeah, I kind of think if they want to send their commandos in and go into these tunnels and do their best to find the Hamas, it's more risky perhaps for them, but that makes more sense to me than this wholesale bombardment from the air that is supposedly targeted, but is obviously, from what we're seeing now, we're getting video now out of Gaza that is real. Where the hospitals are being hit and the places are being hit, where little kids, those pictures of little kids being brought out of the rubble, that's got to stop, and it's not helping Israel.
It is the thing. It's not helping Israel at all, and it's not enough to say, all right, everybody go to South Gaza because we're going to bomb the rest of it. That's not enough. Israel may think that's generous.
I would much rather see myself, and I know it's more dangerous and it means a wider war. I still would much rather see surgical strikes on Iran and on their nuclear power plants, their oil fields, I would rather see that, even if
Well,
even if it causes a wider war.
I don't know, Jim. I mean, again, I'm not a military strategist, but just in the fragile geopolitics of it all, I think that really is asking for a wider war. I mean,
Well, it's not
so
going to piss off the Saudis. The Saudis don't care about Iran. It's not going to make them angry. What's happening now in Palestine, in Gaza, is making the Saudis very upset.
Right,
Well,
but
yeah.
it awakens terrorism again in other parts of the world. It has a collateral effect that's going to be is why those things are reserved. I think Israel needs new leadership. I think they need to negotiate with Abbas and the Palestinians. They're not going to. Hamas does not want to see Israel exist. Does not acknowledge that they have a right to exist. I mean, Zionism has been turned into a curse word. All Zionism really means, it has one meaning: is Israel's right to exist.
Sure.
And I think that Israel does not sell it as well as they need to right now. And I think leadership is the only thing that a lot of people think would change that.
I think the whole situation also is made more frustrating by the fact that a lot of people are just walking into the movie now. They just don't know the history of the region. They don't know the subtleties. They don't know the religious factions. They're just aware of nothing, and yet they take these dogged positions on this, and it's just an absolute mess. And so that public opinion is swayed in ways that just are informed by utter ignorance.
Why can't Israel, with that in mind, Mark? Why can't Israel just say at this point, okay, we won. We've taken out Hamas leaders, and our retribution is complete. Let's all step back. Let's take a breather here, a ceasefire. Let's deal with Netanyahu. Let's deal with Hamas's leaders and try to prop up some leader from the West Bank and do that and stop the wholesale killing that's going on in Gaza.
I think you see Michael Shure's first note, which is that Netanyahu is the problem there. I mean, maybe among others, but he's certainly not going to do that. That move is not in his playbook, is it, Michael?
Got to take care of him first.
Yeah.
He's divisive within his own country. It's not like there is blind support for this in Israel, and that's a note that gets lost as well.
Right. He barely won before this. I don't think if there was another election, he would win now at all. I mean, he has a lot to blame for what happened here, and I think Israelis know that as well as we do.
I think that's so well said. That's exactly right. I mean, the one thing that Israel was sold by Netanyahu was security, and clearly, it was not accurate. Wish we had more time, guys. Thank you. I'm sorry, it's such a bummer. The world's not a happy place right now, but we really appreciate.
I'm going to vote for Dean Phillips as the best score.
All right. Dean Phillips is the answer. Michael, Jim, thanks so much for joining us. See you next time. All right. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.